started. And can everybody see my screen? Wrong screen share. Can everybody see the PowerPoint slide where the guy looks like he's about to whine and cry?
Oh, Karate Kid.
Yes.
Okay, good. You want more? Welcome back. Welcome back. And for new faces, welcome to the group. So with that, this is every Thursday is a recorded session. Our Sundays are no longer going to be in the mornings. They're going to be in the afternoon, around pretty much around this time frame, so like that we can keep it consistent with time. The last time we did the study group on Sunday, which was like around the Easter, a little after, I think it conflicted because people, of course, were going to church and so forth. So we're just going to keep everything in the evenings. With that, of course, as you know, myself, I'm a graduate student. I'm graduating here next month with my master's. I am CRC certified. I just got to send them my transcript so they can disperse me that certification. But at the same time, the group started because I couldn't find a good group locally. So I said, let me see how many people across the US wants to do this study group. And here you are today. Some of you are familiar faces, the names, and some of you are new faces. So I hope you get something out of this. And with that, you know, I encourage you, like we mentioned before, get the red book. If you don't know what the red book is, make sure you have access to the slides. There's an image in there what the red book is. You can get it on Amazon. You can buy it online. Everything that we teach is teach to that book. Now, with that, my disclaimers. This group's not going to guarantee that you pass a CRC exam, and you yourself are ultimately responsible for your commitment and time to study. With that, it's designed for professionals like you and me to help one another grasp a better knowledge of the rehabilitation work and collaborate together to build our knowledge and expertise towards becoming CRCs or certified rehab counselors. With that, all the materials and lectures and information are not funded or sponsored by myself or any agencies themselves. With that, everything's voluntary. It's done by volunteers like you and me. With that, I'm not paying for your textbooks. I'm not paying for your certification exams. I cannot afford that, but you're responsible for your payments, and maybe your schools might have programs where they can give you a discount. Just ask your professor. You never know. Or even ask your employer. They may be able to pay for that if you go sit for it. With that, we don't represent any major organizations. I do not represent the CRC itself, or any school or any specific institutions, but we may discuss about them. Okay. And also we don't have any sort of political or religious affiliation to any particular interest. With that, again, everything is voluntary and has zero mandates. But of course, the more you contribute, the more you share your knowledge, your resources to one another, the better it is going to be for you when you're ready to take that exam. And of course, build on your professional ethics as a future counselor. So this slide was created from our previous previous collaborator. Her name was Raja. We still talk with her. I still talk with her. And and so she didn't pass the CRC back in October, but she's gonna be taking it again in December. So she might not be in here right now, but I definitely sent her to recording lectures. And so this here is something that she created. I just maybe added just a little bit of things on there to make it slightly better, but really it's ultimately the same thing. But with that though, how this group's gonna work is that we're gonna be talking about group work and family dynamics, but you, the audience, are gonna help me teach the class. And how we're going to do that, I'll explain further when we do the survey. With that, do not be afraid if I call out to you to respond to a question or an answer. It may be an open-ended question. It may just be a simple yes or no. With that, though, please share your experiences. Again, I'm a master's student, but that doesn't mean I come with a plethora of work experience working with people with disabilities. Many of you in here are probably already doing the job and work, and you sharing your knowledge is going to be very helpful to other students like myself and a few others in this group. So again, I like to open communication. I like to open talk. So this here that everybody's in here, this is a group. We are a study group. There's different types of groups out there. There's support groups, there's grievances groups, there's many different types of groups. So, and Hunter, even though you have customer service experience, I'm sure some of your experience relates into our field of rehab counseling. I promise you it will. Customer service is probably the critical thing when dealing with people who have unique abilities. So don't discredit your own work experience either, but thank you for sharing. With that though, groups can be small. As there's 2 or more people, that becomes a little group, maybe a clique. And with that, it's just talking about interacting with one another. So in the red book, this is really talking about how group works and more importantly as well, some of the counseling theories in group dynamics, including some of the family counseling. So if you recall in the previous lectures, especially the one that has counseling theories, all those theories that were mentioned from psychodynamic, experiential, humanistic, cognitive, and psychoeducation are all going to always be repetitively applicable to different parts of the rehabilitation counseling. It will. You cannot get away from it. It's unavoidable. It will. Because all of our stuff that we do today for helping people with disabilities is based off our fundamentals of these type of cognitive, these type of therapeutic approaches. Oh, going back. So with that being mentioned, first one, of course, is the classical one, which is a psychoanalysis. Of course, that's used to treat mental conditions. Of course, we're talking about object relations and interpersonal. So as you're aware, and the psychodynamic approach is all about the internal, what the person inside's thinking about. So that goes to your one-on-one therapy. What was the person's internal issues going on in the past, those kind of things. With that, when it's done as a group, what the book says here is that you as a leader, because we will be the group facilitators, will facilitate groups with the opportunity to recognize flawed expectations and relationships through analysis and insight. This helps, this may list the feelings of transference to the group members that may be dysfunctional or current. With that though, the idea is, do we all share something in common that we've all had internally to deal with? PTSD, for example, traumatic brain injury, and of course, cultural issues. And of course, you got the experimental humanistic approaches. Again, that's that Gestalt. The logotherapy by Viktor Frankl helps to explore the discovered meaning of life, existential and person-centered. And here in this theory, it explores a realistic and person-centered understanding of self and empower the group members to change and take responsibility. This is the here and now. So unlike psychoanalytic, where people can bring up something maybe in the past, like say, for instance, past grievances, things that were unfinished, this here focuses on the present. And then, of course, we have our more contemporary ones, which is the behavioral approaches. Behavior therapy, REBT, CBT, reality therapy, stress inoculation, solution focus, and different types. So in a matter of speaking, when we talk about these specific categories, they each have a specific discipline that they teach a theory into. So let me go to here. So if you're noticing, there's a lot of colors. And that was something that Roger did to catch your attention. But more importantly, a lot of good therapies are applicable when it's done through cognitive behavior. Like majority of support groups or group therapies are done on the CBT approach. Think about it this way. If you've ever done something like a job club or a sexual trauma support group, you're going to use a lot of CBT, more or less. And with that, the hardest thing as counselors is maintaining the control and operating the leadership and facility and co-leadership within that. Now, let me ask you here.
Hello? Are we on?
Is everybody frozen or is it just me?
No,
I can hear anything. I don't know what's going on.
I think
can
he went.
can
He
hear.
might have lost
Is he-
connection.
I'm not able to hear
I
either.
can't hear him.
All right, let's see.
He's here.
He says he's here.
Yeah.
But nobody can hear him.
Yeah,
Have I been talking quiet by myself this whole time?
the
Yeah.
entire time.
Did you
Let me
miss
pause.
yourself?
You know what? I have a secondary backup mic and I always do this. Oh God. I'm like, why is
No, it's
nobody-
only been about a minute, Kennedy, so you're good. You're good.
I think it's been more than a minute because I already went through like 5 different slides. Ooh, okay. I paused the recording. So what was the last thing you heard from me? Did you hear the disclaimers? Did you all hear the disclaimers?
Yes, we heard the disclaimers. You were going over the current slide, the cognitive behavioral approach.
Okay. Also, my bandwidth went down, so it kind of just crashed for a minute there too. So go figure. Go figure. That was so strange. Okay, let me do something here real quick, and then we'll continue recording. No. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background about something. I think she sees herself in the mirror. Okay, let's get back to business. So, pardon the technical difficulties, but before I got a disconnect on here, we were talking about the different types. So there's very different categories of groups, but they use some sort of theory behind them. So I guess my question here was, what has been some of your experiences either leading or co-facilitating any sort of group? And anybody's free to answer.
Yes, so in my experience in the past, I was a drug court advisor, kind of similar to a counselor without the fanciness. We did definitely use the cognitive behavioral approach and behavioral therapeutic interventions. But for the most part, it's a lot more to it as far as like person-centered. I use a lot of just being present. But in regards to wanting to see changes in the behavior, yes, most of our workbooks were from the CBT interventions.
And I appreciate you sharing that. So that's a good experience. You've done that. And then moving on here on this before I lost my mic again here for a moment. What do you think, and anybody can chime in and answer, what do you think is the hardest part of leading some sort of group? Hi, Shova, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to tailor that question to you. What do you think is the most hardest part in leading any sort of group?
To be honest, I have been working as a vocational rehab counselor, with veterans with disabilities. So I have not led any group. Only I have taken group class, when I was in master's program. So at that time I led a group of our, that's only experience that I have.
And how was that experience for you when you were leading that group? Like, what did you find difficult in that?
Oh, leading a group was really group counseling is a little bit, I'm behind, this is something that I have to work on. I was pretty nervous, but I did it, I read a group and then it was good. I can tell more.
Okay, appreciate you sharing. I mean, whether you just did it in a class or whether you actually had some hands-on experiences, hosting or facilitating a group is not an easy process and not everybody can do it. Even just
Yeah.
even this study group here right now, this isn't easy to host. You know, there's a lot of playing parts that come in here to make this happen. It isn't just a one person, one man show leads all, even though it seems like that at the moment, but it isn't. And you know, there are some going to be difficult points whether you're doing an actual group or even if it's a study group, even if it's a group of people getting together to celebrate something. It's not easy because there's a lot of planning, coordinations, potential rehearsals, those kind of things. So not everybody can lead a group. And let's say if you're doing a family counseling group, because you have you, the patient, the parents, and everybody else, that's not easy to kind of facilitate and watch everything that's going on. It takes a unique skill. Or is anybody who has a CRC certified good at hosting a group? Absolutely not. But it does take a special kind of person. So as we go through this and we're talking about different groups, think about your own leadership style. And not only that, think about how you would interact with a group. What would be some things you might consider doing or changing? With that too, like what are some things maybe you might want to study and look up on to be a more effective communicator than hosting a group? Because sometimes, depending where you work at, they may ask you to lead a group, a substance use group. They might ask you to lead a job club. You never know. So those are just going to be some things to keep in mind when we're going through this and we get to the quiz part, which I'm looking for it. It'll be there in the second half. We'll go over and talk about. So so with that, the biggest thing, like when we go back to groups, a lot of it today, when we talk about group therapy, where we're talking about a CBT approach, or mostly cognitive behavior approaches. And a lot of times that's using things like commitment therapy, DBT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. It's not really changing the psychological event, but they seek to change in the function. So my recommendation for you is if you're not too familiar with the types of therapy approaches to group counseling, please read the red book. It goes into a lot of details. Earlier when Emily came in, she led us a mindfulness group before we started the study group, you know, and she led you through it using some of these specific approaches. So other types of groups, educational groups. This is for those with individuals with mental health, substance use, domestic violence, and trauma survivors. So if you've done mental health counseling, then you are also aware that in part of the therapy or treatment process for those clients, they require psychoeducation. That's also called an education group. There's the support groups. There's also the self-help groups like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and things like that. And those are people that they seek themselves. You can refer them to them, but they seek themselves to find improvement to help out. So I see what she did. And those right there are actually the psychoeducational approaches. So, but ultimately, uncompared with CBT, where you're looking at replacing certain behaviors or certain thoughts, in the psychoeducational, it's pretty much to acquire knowledge about something and then develop a good, effective coping strategy. So definitely read the red book. With that, when it comes to more about a psychoeducational group, they can be organized based on the goals, the needs of the members, like I was talking before, job clubs, other civic trainings for successful transition, a caregiver group. You know, in the field of vocational rehab, many people with disabilities might end up having a caregiver for them at some point. And they may require a home aide or someone to help care for them. The VA has a program for caregivers as well. And that's very taxing because they're dealing with a person with disability and putting their own lives aside for that individual. So one approach is using psychoeducational support groups. Another one. Now, motivational interviewing isn't really a group type of therapy, it's a technique. With that, it's just a technique that's used within counseling to work with a group. So motivational interviewing is not unlike CBT, where it's usually sometimes maybe a one-to-one or a small group per se. Motivational interviewing can be used within multiple people because it helps them change thoughts, challenge ideas, roll with some of the resistance, and then elicit the change talk. And you can use that within a group itself. You know, it's used a lot, of course, with those who have a dual diagnosis, substance use disorders, chronic health, and behavioral. With that, it helps people change or want to change their lifestyle to better themselves, and it's just a way to talk to them to bring it out. So rather than doing a lot of closed-ended questions and homework, you're trying to get to a lot of the points right then and there with reflective listening, reflective and active listening and summarizing, making sure everybody understands what's going on within the group. So there's just different techniques that you can use. Now, the more important part though is understanding the stages of group development. This can definitely be, it might be asked for in the CRC. They may mention one of these type of counseling approaches, but more likely they might ask one of these questions. And so I would encourage you to study it to make sure you know the difference between initial, transition, working, and final stage, because depending on how the group is led and how the individuals within the group interact with one another will dictate what stage you're either on or stuck on. And it's you as the leader to try to identify that so you can help them either overcome that or find ways to get them towards overcoming to get to the next stage. But it also depends on the group that's being hosted. So just keep that in mind. That's pretty much going down here, you know. So I have a question in my survey, which it'll ask you. It's not a right or wrong answer, but I just want you to be aware of it. I want to ask you though, what kind of group you think this is, the CRC study group? What kind of stage you think we're going to be on or that we're maybe in right now? So I want you all to think about that, okay? So in the initial stage of group development, that's your first few sessions, maybe first 1 or 2 sessions, getting to know people better, putting expectations down like what we did in the very beginning. I say, you know, what are the group norms? What are we going to do? Do we want to add anything else to it? Do we all agree to meet at this certain time or not? Do we need to make necessary changes? Are we going to be okay with changes? Of course, identifying those personal goals, confidentialities. With that, of course, you know, as a leader, it's up to us as like say the counselors to decide how much to share with each other and how much the leader is going to share within the group. Do we want the group to lead itself? Or do we want to be the ones that lead the group? So it just depends on the type of group you're wanting and what your leadership style is. So in transition stage though, this is where after about a couple of sessions, maybe like right now, or like when we did that survey, we wanted to see, you know, who was going to be participating in the group, who's not, what times are going to work. And then with that, how do people feel around one another, talking openly to one another, sharing information, learning knowledge, you know, those kind of things. With that, is there somebody in the group that's just being frustrated, being angry, that's causing a disruption amongst everybody else, you know? And part of that as a leader or like say the counselor would be working on removing any of those sort of resistance and barriers. And if somebody has a little bit more issues than others, that might be a time to decide to identify those barriers, and then maybe do a private one-to-one or something like that. But with that, you as a CRC holder, even as a rehab counselor, need to be able to identify that. Now, somebody here said they used to run a substance abuse or substance related counseling group. But I'm going to ask another group member here. On a scale, and you can actually even type this in the group chat here. On a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is not at all confident to 10 is confident, like very confident. How confident are you in your own skills? How confident are you in your own skills that you feel you can maintain group control? You don't have to come off the mic, you just type it in the group chat here. 1 being not at all confident and 10 being very confident. I see some 1s, 5s, 6s, 7s. I'm going to answer myself too. I'm going to put a 6. I noticed nobody here put a 0. And I'm curious as to why nobody chose a 0. So I'm going to pick on you, Rose. Why did you choose a 7 and not a 0?
It's actually depend. I was like, okay, I wish I can elaborate.
I think it depends on the type of group I'm working with. I've been working doing family counseling for a while, and usually sometimes like the highest number been like 6, 7 people. So yeah, I think I didn't pick 0 because I have been doing it pretty much. So I feel like, and then it goes well. That's why I didn't pick 0. I think I'm maybe 6, 7 there.
So you have already experienced doing family counseling, and then so for you, Rose, what is the most
Mhm.
hardest part in leading those kind of groups?
The hardest part for me is when the like family, when the parent struggle to understand the diagnosis of the kiddos, because I work in the mental health. So you find like the family have maybe 3 kids and they all have different diagnoses and teenagers. So the parent is struggle to understand them at the same time. So it's bring a lot of confusion trying to educate the parent about the diagnosis of the kiddos, trying to understand them. And at the same time, trying to handle the kids, like, to implement the techniques, like the coping skills. So that's the hard part, like bringing them to the same page. So I actually like separated the group. I do like 2 sessions in a week, which I met with kids, like individually kids, and then I meet with the parents. And then the following week I do meet with all of them together. So kind of like when I meet with kids, like kind of listening to their concern, what's going on at home, what they feel like they're not being listened. And then I meet with the parent. I present in a way that I make sure that even if the parent share with the kid, they won't feel like I'm been breaking their confidentiality and kind of bring more trouble. And then when I meet together, it has like use a lot of wisdom, kind of handling the kind of fighting together. So yeah, it's a lot of challenges. It is, yeah.
Hey,
I don't
thanks
know
for
if that
sharing.
makes sense.
No, I think what do here and everybody else in the audience think? I'd like to see some more people get off the mic. What do you all think about that? Everybody's quiet, like, yeah, that sounds good. Sounds good to me. Thank you, Rose. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Whew, they have a tough crowd tonight. They're like, I'm not, thank you so much, Rose. They're like, I'm not gonna talk. I'm just gonna wait for them to call me out. Because I will, like I told you, I said, I'm gonna call names out. I will.
That's okay.
Don't think I won't. But thanks again, Rose. You helped. She has a good presentation too that she created. So, and we have that. And I also else be willing to jump in it. I see John is the mic off. Did you want to chime in?
No, I was just thinking about my role as working with our veterans at the VA. Of course, again, people don't know that I'm a service coordinator. So we try to house our veterans, and I work in a shelter. But I'm confident because I've done groups before, but not as like with the stages and things like that. But I have so much information as far as resources in regards to employment. That's my pet peeve there. So I'm able to run a group, but not to the point where it's how it should be. But I can provide information, allow people to talk, provide information, and sometimes I come across individuals with that hopelessness, and then they'll try to interrupt and throw out about the economy, for example, and the barriers that they have, and the unable to get employment, and so that's where I might get stuck at. But I've done groups, and I feel good about it. I just need a little bit more practice. That's about it.
Yeah, I agree. So like you have there's the therapeutic part of it, and then there's the education part of it. And so, for someone to have those experiences such as you and Rose here, you understand that it does take a little bit more than just one person to kind of dictate something. It takes a couple of people to help make things go too, because a lot of times we're not really doing it ourselves. We may teach something, but that doesn't mean we're really facilitating something. So it just depends on the group. So, but thank you so much, Eva. I appreciate it. Appreciate you chiming in there. So as you go through that, make sure you know when you think about your own groups, how far does your group go to? Is it a group that starts from beginning to end? Is it a group that just keeps going and keeps working? Or is it not a group? Maybe it's just chaos. So thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. So with that too, you have the working stages where you're working on issues, attempt to accomplish goals. People are practicing some of their coping mechanisms. They're doing stuff together, keeping each other accountable, those kind of things. The leader's function is pretty much maybe just giving disclosures, giving feedback, identifying and explore common things, reducing activity and structuring and leading groups, just depending on what it is. And then of course, not every group does this, but for some groups, like if they're a closed group, maybe it's just done for like the, I'll give an example again, job club, and everybody ends up picking a job, and maybe about closing the final stage of the group development, which again, not our groups get to that. But for those groups that do get to that, there's of course the feelings of anxiety, sadness, and fears, maybe potential ends in friendship, things that are hanging that there was no time to resolve because, you know, there's only so much time that, let's say if you're taking insurance, the insurance is going to allow you to use, or that your program is going to allow them to go through. It just depends on what kind of group it is you're facilitating. Like here, when this group finishes at the end of the week, there's a pretty much like a 3-week hiatus. I call it a hiatus, where nobody's showing up to the class, everything's finished, and people are taking their CRC exams. And the hope is that everybody comes out with smiling faces and has their certifications. You know, that's my hope, that everybody in here has that. I want them to have that feeling, and I want to be able to celebrate with you on that. So, but that's, so instead of feeling sadness and anger, I want to feel excited for you. So keep that in mind. There's different stages. Again, what kind of group do you think this is? It's something to think about. Another thing too, when it comes to holding a group, there's also the disability aspect of it, of the considerations. Group heterogeneity, I might not have said that right. Group members come from different backgrounds, cognitive limitations, communication. Maybe you're hosting a group that's a job club for people who are blind, low vision, LVBI. They may be deaf. Maybe you're hosting a support group of people who are deaf trying to find work or trying to be self-sustaining. Maybe your group is people dealing with multiple sclerosis, and you know them and a few other people just got recently diagnosed with it, realizing it's going to change their lives forever. A cancer support group. So there's things to also consider in addition to just hosting a normal group or a regular group. There's the unique dynamics of certain types of disabilities. You know, so it just depends on being sensitive to your group. So now, this one you're going to see on one of my quizzes when I pop out here later. So I'm going to keep this in the back of your mind, and I want you to think, what kind of group is it this time? The people that were here in January, we knew what kind of group we ran, but I think this one's a little bit different. So I'm going to let you all answer that one when I distribute the quiz. But keep in mind, what are the 3 general types of leadership styles and within a group? And I ask you to be honest with me, what do you think my leadership style is? Me hosting this group and doing all that. It's not gonna offend me, but I'm just curious. So make sure when you answer that question, just be honest about it and think about your own leadership style too. They can be shifted from time to time, and it's just based on the needs of the group. There we go. All right. Oh, somebody already says one answer. I won't say it aloud, but I see it. Thank you. Now, with that, there's also a code to them. There's a letter assigned to them. There's the authoritarian leadership style, which is X leader, not like Malcolm X, X leader. These tend to interpret, give advice, teach, and direct. They may be friendly and persuasive, and communication tends to be more direct between leaders and members. They can consider themselves mostly powerful, charismatic, and manipulative, and group members are expected to be obedient and compliant. They feel productive but not satisfied with this type of leader and may feel responsibility of accomplishments. Member participations may be dependent on prodding from readers. So I'm going to ask a question here. What type of job profession do you think implements the Theory X leadership style or authoritarian?
Kennedy, do you mind repeat your question?
Absolutely. What kind of job or company do you think runs an authoritarian or theory X leadership style?
That's easy. Public education.
Public education. Okay, I'll take that. What else? Think about in times of crisis, emergencies, responses, disasters. People are like, I don't want to say because it's true.
Is it Red Cross?
Let's think of more terms of combat.
Yeah, is it the army?
That's part of it. Yeah, the military, right? If anybody's ever served in the military, like kind of like school, or even let's say the prison systems, you know, jails, prisons, the military, law enforcement, they don't really have time. And I'm not saying they're manipulated. That's not what I'm getting at here. They don't have the time to sit around and have a big open discussion and have a community event, because when an emergency is going on, they need somebody with that authoritarian style to direct and make things happen to get it done. In a school system, say like Emily mentioned, the school academic system, when you have a group of children, it's just one of you and 13 kids, you know, you might not be able to have as maybe at the start of it, it becomes very authoritative because it's do as I say. I'm the adult figure, you know, I'm the one that's in charge here, and you know, you need to do this job. In the military, when you have lower enlisted soldiers getting things done, there are supervisors or non-commissioned officers to make sure that the job gets done. And they don't have time in a means of combat when the bullets are flying over their heads and things are shooting for them to sit around and say, well, do we all agree to shoot? No, it's get this done. Let me show you how to do it and do it this way. Don't do it any other way. Do it this way. It's very authoritative. In a prison system, if they got it's only one guard per, I don't know, 60, 70 inmates, that person has to be authoritative in that leadership style, and they have to make sure that that they're compliant, they're not hiding things, they're doing those kind of things. So those are the kind of stuff you can mention. And John, you want to say something too?
Oh, well, what about the VA with being contracted with the VA to work with veterans, and you know, the VA wants to get the numbers up to end homelessness. You got those charismatic people, the politicians, the speakers, you know, all that. I would say the VA, is that one? Would that be?
Yeah, you can say VA too, and nothing wrong with it. You know, there are different types of jobs that require somebody to be that authoritative figure. You have to have somebody who's a speaker of the VA. You have to have somebody who's going to answer to a whole bunch of people. You have to have somebody who's going to answer to those political questions, and they have to be able to communicate, manipulate things, and talk and negotiate with one another. Major corporations, when they make those decisions to cut thousands of jobs, somebody's up there being authoritative in that to make those decisions. So, you know, there are many different jobs for that. And so think of it like this: when you're leading a group, even if it's a big or a small group, what kind of leadership style are you doing? Do people feel productive but not satisfied when they feel they have little responsibility accomplishments, or do they feel like they're contributing or being part of something? You know, I'm not saying this is wrong. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there are different roles where as groups, like a squad, a platoon, a department, corporate agency, are going to require this type of leadership to do their functions. But now, do you use that? Is that being used for the right type? You know, for the type of group you need? Is that necessary? Is it needed? Like in the beginning, it may be needed, but eventually your leadership style may change depending on the group. So that goes to the next one, the democratic leadership style. Why? ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué? And so this one here, group leaders are more group-centered and less directive. They trust in group members to see potential growth in them. Now, I'm sure that if this group here was a bunch of high school kids getting ready to graduate, trying to get a first certification exam, I feel that this group may be a little more authoritative, while in contrast, we're all adults here and some of us have tenured work experience. I feel a little bit more at ease to let the group talk and discuss and share things. You know what I'm saying? Just as an example. With that too, if the group allows for a democratic style, if let's say in terms of disabilities, everybody has the similar aptitude or similar level of education and knowledge, yeah, it'd be good to run it like a democratic type leadership. But if you have people that are they're not in a master's program, they have a GED, and they've been living in a system, it's not going to be the same thing. So you find share like-minded people, but you know in that you can just play as a role as a facilitator and not a director. So some of you feel like this is like a democratic group, which I'm glad you feel that way, and I hope, and that's a good thing to hear, but that because this group allows that to happen. The level of competency in this group allows that, I think, believe to happen. So with that, that's also called, again, theory Y leader. Also, too, people feel like they may have a sense of belonging. So when you're running a support group, do people feel like they can actually share about themselves? Or do you, again, have that one individual that's like disrupting it for everybody else and challenging the facilitators, challenging the leaders? That might have to switch back to authoritarian. And then you have the other one, Laz's fair leadership style. Who here knows what the Laz's fair leadership is, or ever even heard of it? I know for the ones that were here back in the January cohort, we had a big discussion on this. The easiest way I understood it, and I would encourage you to look at the videos from the last session for the March cohort, that we really had a great discussion on it. It's really good. It's pretty much letting the group kind of happen and letting it do whatever it wants. What kind of groups do you think are a Laz's fair group or a Theory Z type of leadership? Right, Naha, Theory Z. What kind of groups do you think would be considered a Laz's fair group? I'll put it to you like this. When you have somebody that's never really run a group before and their director or supervisor tells them they're going to start a study group, what kind of group outcome you think is going to happen? Especially if they have limited skills and knowledge in it. Probably going to have a Laz's fair. Basically, there's no true leadership, non-leaders, the group just happens as itself, and it's like, well, then what's the point of me coming here if I'm not learning anything or I'm not doing anything? What was the point of this, since I really didn't get nothing out of it? And the group leader was like quiet the whole time and two people were bickering with one another. Let's put it in terms of a family where you had lost complete control of the group and everybody's arguing with one another. That's what you call the Theory Z or Lazarus Fair, because there's no authoritative, there's no structure. But there could be also potential groups, good groups that may not need necessarily a leader because the group takes care of itself. But then you would say, well, wouldn't that go back to democratic? Not necessarily. So in part of it, just putting this in simple terms, for CRC purposes, make sure you know the difference between the three types of leaderships for counselors, Theory X, Y, and Z, and make sure you understand how they're described, because that could possibly come up on a CRC question. For Raja, she said that this actually came up in the CRC when she took it, and I'm sure it'll probably come back again. So make sure you understand how these leadership styles are. Think of it in terms of what would that be applied to, if I'm trying to figure out what the answer is, and then take, of course, your best guess. So now this is another one too, the leadership techniques. I'm not going to go into this one so much because most of us here should know this, but basically those are the main basic skills: active listening, restating, clarifying, summarizing, questioning, interpreting, depending on some groups, confronting, reflecting, be a supporter, self-disclosure, and of course, knowing how to terminate, which is the hardest part, knowing how to terminate positively and check in with group members. So those are basically the overall stages of the leader in hosting a group. Now, I'm going to give you guys about 5 to 7 minutes, a little break, and then we're going to go ahead and roll into the quiz. So feel free to get off mic. If you guys want to talk to each other, go for it. I encourage you to. I'll be right back, and then we'll get started with the quiz time. All right, so we got about 2 minutes left and then we will resume the shares recording. All right, so we are back screen sharing. I think this was still recording. I do not remember. So we're gonna take a quiz. There's gonna be some questions in here that you know, and there'll be questions in here that you do not know, which is fine. With that, it's to kind of give you an idea of some stuff they're gonna ask for you, and we'll cover the other half here in a little while when we get to that section. But we're pretty much almost done. So if you're all back, thank you so much for being back here on time. I am posting a link inside the group chat, not the way I wanted it, but here is a better link. And I'm gonna ask you, please, 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 to go ahead and complete the little survey. Okay. So there's some in there that are going to be just a little open-ended. It's just based off your responses. And this is to show you so you don't get it scared like, oh my gosh, we're going to pass or fail. This isn't a pass or failing, but there's some questions in there that are modeled like a CRC question. But make sure you do answer them. You are required to answer every one of them, so do not miss one. But again, please click the link, go ahead and fill out the information. And then once you're done filling out the information, just type in here the words done. And that'll let me know that you completed it, okay? And then once you finish that, what'll happen is when we talk about the family dynamics portion, we'll start answering some of these other questions. So as you are coming back, please make sure you click on the link. Please click on the link above and complete the survey quiz. And when you complete it, type in the box the word. Sorry, John?
I'm sorry. You said click on the link here.
Yeah, no, in the group, in the meeting chat, right here.
Let's see where we at. Okay, yeah, I don't know what's going on.
If you're on a tablet or phone, I'm not too sure how you get to the chat box, but you need to be able to get to the chat box.
Yeah, I'm on a laptop and I can't see it in my chat box.
Okay.
Oh,
Let me start sharing screen and right there. Oh, I see why. That's my fault. I was giving it to one person.
that's okay.
There you go. Hey, if you're on phone, it's fine. You can still click on the link, fill it out, and then you can still come back to the chat and say done. It should be
All right,
really
there we
quick.
go. Okay,
So,
thank you.
if you're on phone, just make sure you can still click on the link, fill it out, and then come back to the group chat. You have that selection whether you're in Apple or Android. So I'll give you a few minutes to take care of that, and then we'll get started on the next session. And let me go back to sharing screen. And this is what you should be seeing when you hit that link. You have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. About 14. I don't know how to count. Yeah, about 13 or 14. And don't overthink them. I'm not asking you to get the right answer. Again, we're going to discuss over together what would be some of the right possible answers or what will be the right answer. So, but this is give you some ideas of how some of those questions, if you've never taken it before, are modeled in the CRC. And again, when you finish it, type the word done. So I know you completed it. So I should have a total of 10 responses. I don't know how to use my correct parentheses. Not parentheses, quotes. I don't know how to do grammar. And while everybody's taking that little quiz, I'm going to put on just a little bit of some music. Again, don't overthink them too much. We are definitely going to go over them in the group here.
Hey there, no need to adjust your TV, or more likely your phone. You're for innovative ways. That's one down. We got 9 more to go. Thank you, Emily.
I'm hoping John has finished. That's a done. Give it a couple more minutes, but come on, let's get this done. Don't overthink it. Just read it and pick an answer because we're gonna go through these together. Putting the pressure in. Thank you, John. We still got about 8 more. 7. That's 4 people who are done, including myself. Yes, I took it too. So we're almost there. Come on, people. Come on, come on. Almost done. Couple more minutes. If you don't know an answer, don't fret it. We're gonna go over this together. So just pick an answer and then we'll talk about it in the book, okay? Done for me. There we go. Three minutes. 1 more minute remaining and that is it. I hope the other people that are participants in here are responding. Still I'm waiting for Hunter, J-Boat, Cassie on her iPad, Salimi, Sunny, and I believe the Zoom user. Drove off. Thank you so much, Jebo. Oh my gosh, please, please help me to say the name correctly. I don't want to sound terrible doing this. I'm so sorry. I give everybody 1 more minute. 1 minute, 1 minute. Put some answers in, select some responses, and just go ahead and put it in. Don't worry if it's right or wrong. Don't worry if it's right or wrong. Go ahead and get those answers and put them in. All right. All right, we got 9 responses. I think pretty much mostly everybody is done. All right. Yeah, I'm not gonna listen to that for 10 hours, and nor will I make you suffer for 10 hours. Okay? All right. So I wanted to do this intentionally because I wrote some of those questions that I've seen that may be similar to how you might have to respond to those in a CRC exam, because some of them are situational based and some of them are either you know it or you don't. And a lot of this came out of that red book. So if you're not familiar with some of the questions or content we covered, please read the red book, because that's how the testers for CRC, or that's how the people make the exam, are going to choose those type of questions. So since our summary here is what we call random responses from you, it's anonymous, so don't worry, your name's not gonna get called out. The first one here, I allowed you all the opportunity to think what you believe is most important when to make a group, any sort of group work. And what I'm seeing here is that it takes a multitude of different types of tasks and aspects to make a group work. They need to be cohesive. There needs to be a good screening, absolutely, depending if it's a closed group. Need to see if if the group's gonna help each other reach their goals. Like this group, being honest, self-disclosures. Again, that screening and confidentiality, depending on if it's a closed group or not. Humbleness. Uh, Java said it depends on her whether or not what the most important of the group. So I guess her as the individual. Okay. Um, with that, the leadership, how does leadership work? The teamwork, if you have a co-facilitator or some people that are helping facilitate, maybe you have peer group leaders. With that too, the cohesion again, and of course, solution focus, which that's just the solution focus. You can think of that like if you're just trying to resolve a specific problem. Sometimes support groups don't necessarily need to have a solution. Bereavements, for example. So there's different types of it, but a big thing is making sure that you have it from the looks of it, group cohesions, screening, and really building a good team helps. But again, that's going to be based on the type of groups you lead. So there's multiple aspects. So the first question, what are the main stages in group development? The answer, if you understand the stages of group development, was all the above. If you said none of the above, like one of us here, ultimately, there are different stages of the group development. There's 4 of them. So, and I intentionally listed them on here. So like that, you can kind of see, yes, we've just talked about that. There are these stages. And then of course, if there's none of the above, then there's something not quite right. This one here. Now, this one was a little bit of a, the answers in the question. If you were here last time with Emily, you were here on a Sunday, this is where the answer sometimes may be in the question, but if you understand what those stages are, you can also potentially answer the question correctly. So the key part here was saying that this was just the 3rd session. There was some resistance from a few clients in the group. One seems to talk more than others. Another's nervous about their feelings, and majority of people chose a transition stage or a working stage. So my recommendation is make sure you know the key differences between the working stage and the transition stage. Because when let's say us as a quote unquote, supposedly might be a democratic group, is moving from a transition to a working stage, like when we start practicing actual quiz questions, similar to this, and people are working cohesively together, that would be more in the working stage. And this here the key words was not everybody quite knows things yet. Some people are still nervous about sharing stuff. Everybody's not fully trusting one another. So the right answer was transition stage. But again, I encourage you, make sure you read what these stages are so you can figure out the answer when they're giving you the description of which stage that this situation's in. Now, I think I put this one out there intentionally because the last thing we keyed on it was the Lazarus Fair. Keep in mind though, make sure you also know what the theory X leader is, the theory Y leader is about authoritarian and democratic too. So like that, you can get the answer. So if they start talking about a theory Z leader, if they start talking about a theory X leader, you're like, oh yeah, the X is the authoritarian. A Y, oh, democratic, So 90% of people feel that this is a democratic. Thank you so much. I try to be as democratic as possible. I don't really intentionally try to be authoritative. I'm only authoritative when I need to get you guys to come off mic to come talk with me and with the others. But for the most part, any of the resources I share with you, and of course, you're more than welcome to share to others. And of course, you're more than welcome to share your knowledge. You're more than happy to take the slides and presentations that I use and use it for your own means and your own groups. I'm not going to hold that from you. This stuff everything was voluntary. So, but basically that's how you feel about the group. So I appreciate it. Everything is a contribution. Okay. So this one seemed very, very diverse. Some of the common therapeutic factors of the group presentations based on interview and empirical data include all the following except universality, limited behavior, non-maleficence, interpersonal learning, group cohesion, altruism, imparting information. So this seems like not that many people know the therapeutic factors of group interventions. So that's something we're definitely I'm gonna touch on here. I'm gonna make a note of that. We gotta talk about the therapeutic factors that affect group interventions. Okay, which I can tell you the answer right now is actually non-maleficence. That's not a therapeutic factor. Non-maleficence is an ethics based question. If we're talking about beneficence versus non-maleficence versus fidelity and stuff like that, has nothing to do with groups. All the other things here that I mentioned are actually part of the factors that affect a group. Every single one of these: universality, limited behavior, interpersonal learning, cohesion, altruism, that affects the type of group. But we'll discuss that from the book. According to Lieberman et al., which I have seen a similar question written like this, there are 4 basic functions of group leaders that should present in the group process. Of the 4, this function is used to uncover and encourage the expressions of thoughts, emotions, and values among the group. If you do not know what these are, please read the red book. They break it down into pretty good details, but this here the answer was kind of in the question. If you know what this is talking about, to uncover and encourage expression of thoughts, that's called emotional stimulation, because they're talking about thoughts, emotions, and values. And those, of course, are emotions, not necessarily meaning attributions or executive functions or caring. So again, definitely make sure on those little things when you're using your flashcards or whichever, you understand what these different types of functions is according to Lieberman. There's other types of functions based on certain other individuals, but make sure you do understand it, because they could throw something like that in the CRC exam. I have seen it. And it made me have to stop and think too. So according to Warden 2003, this was from the red book.
Can you go back to the previous one? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you go back?
Yeah. By the way, this isn't necessarily in the CRC, that's in the red book. But you're more than welcome to take a picture and screenshot it if you want.
Okay.
So here we go. Right here. Leader characteristics and functions. I'm not too sure what page this will be for you in the book, but it is in there, and there's 4 functions. And
thank you.
so if you chose caring, the answer what would have been in the question should have been the group members' well-being and the effectiveness of intervention. That's considered caring. When you're uncovering and encouraging the expression of thoughts, emotions among group members, that's emotional stimulation. Meaning attribution allows leaders to help members develop their ability to understand themselves. And then executive function is setting parameters in the group, establishing rules and guidelines, and keeping the group on track. Sort of like what I do with this group. So make sure you at least understand it, because they can throw something like this to you in there. That's something you may oversee, or they may even go to techniques. That's that other slide that you saw earlier. But I the best way I would approach this, though, put on a flashcard. Did anybody else want to chime in? Okay. Thank you, though. Thank you. But I hope that clarifies that. Sometimes, if you know what the definition is, you can get the answer, or sometimes, I believe this one, the answer is in the question. According to Warden 2003, this refers to the concrete issues being discussed and refers to how the issues is portrayed in family interaction. This is called what type of dynamics. So it seems like we're all kind of split here. So this is going into the next session we're going to talk about, which is family dynamics. But with that, according to the red book, there are different types of issues. Let me go here. Hold on. Here we go. This one right here. Family dynamics. And we're going to talk about these shortly. You have individual versus system dynamics, linear versus circular causality, and content versus process dynamics. Okay. Key word was the concrete issues being discussed and how the issues were portrayed in the family. So it's two-part. It was a two-part answer. You had to understand that content refers to concrete issues and process refers to how the issue is portrayed in interactions. But that's something you need to study. And we'll discuss about that here in family dynamics soon. So not an easy one, but something to pick up to study and learn. Now, according to key figures Michael White and David Epstein, the therapist is not seen as an expert, but rather than the keyword, a collaborator with the family. The therapist may also use questions about family relationships so members can be more open to share their views. This theory closely relates to, I'm sorry, that's my fault, not these objectives, but for which objective? And it seems like we were split between narrative and constructive family therapy and solutions focused. So let's see what Michael White and David Epstein are. The answer is narrative and constructivist. It came out of this section right here. So if you're in the green, good. Solutions focused, there is a section for solutions focused. Let me see, I think it is. Actually, I don't believe crucial family, strategic family. Yep, solution focused. That's Steve and Insoo Kimberg. I kid you not, I had a question that they asked me about Nathan Ackerman and one of his specific theories, and I believe they asked me something about Frankel a little bit. So they might ask you in questions about who coined what theory and what was that theory addressing. So keep that in mind, that as you learn about this section here or any other sections, make sure you know who some of those key figures are. You don't have to know every single one of them, at least understand that solutions focus is Steve and Insoo. Strategic family is Jay Haley. Humanistic is Carl Whitaker in Virginia. Not satire. I don't know if you noticed that, but I intentionally misspelled. Oh, that's the next question. Stuff like that. So that's the next question here. In humanistic and experiential family therapy, the major goal is to increase family members' capacity to experience their lives more fully by sharing their struggles here and now. The key figure in this form is who? In this form of therapy I believe was Carl Whitaker. So it is not Nathan Ackerman. It's not Virgin Satire. There is a person in Virgin Satire, but not satire. And Jay Haley is something else, as you saw in the book. This one here, what is level 2 of the Marshark and Seligman 5-level guidance for an intervention conceptualized? Majority of people chose provide information to the family. I believe that is correct. Provide information to the family, but you will have to know this here. You would have to understand that and know what that's talking about. And then the answer here, 90% of people got it right. Correct. The key here was that you as a group leader was told that somebody was talking to another client outside the family. So this is like choose the best answer. And then the last one here, this one can be a very subjective, and I intentionally wrote this here because there's no necessarily a real right or wrong answer, but you can see something similar like this in the CRC exam where they're going to ask you to pick the best response, not necessarily the right response. So this one here was, as a rehab counselor, you may be faced with dealing with clients different than in terms of culture, values, and beliefs. During group session, you notice that the family members remain quiet and only let the head of the household speak to them. At times, the spouse may jump in, but only if she is given the approval to speak by her husband in the household. This family are migrants. These family members are migrants from Saudi Arabia. As a rehabilitation counselor, you should do which of the following. Nobody said to end the session, report to your supervisor. Somebody said to decline to further talk with them because they aren't American. I would encourage you, if that's something that you, oh, okay, I see Nahal. I would definitely encourage you to take a multicultural counseling course, because here as a rehabilitation counselor, it shouldn't matter your nationality or background. Definitely you might want to review yourself and who your audiences are. C, pay attention to verbal cues and ask questions about their culture for properly family approach. And D, ask the husband it's okay to talk with his spouse when responding to her. Now, again, this was no necessarily right or wrong answer, but this was, I think, was in the book itself, was talking about verbal cues, so I can say why you chose that. For me, since I wrote the scenario, I actually chose to ask the husband if it's okay, because I understand that they're in a Middle Eastern culture. The head of the house was the one who predominantly speaks on behalf of most of the family members, and you have to get permission. So for me, I would just, since I'm comfortable with it, I would say, yeah, is it okay if I was to speak with your spouse? You know, make sure it's okay. And if everything's fine, then continue forward. If I wasn't too sure about the culture, then I would just kind of pay attention to what's going on throughout most of the talk to then elicit the answer. So with that, keep in mind about yourself and your culture. With that, of course, you definitely want to pay attention to cues. And if you're comfortable about it and you understand that culture, then you should be appropriate to respond to it. So I hope you all got a little good something out of this here, because now we're going to talk about the family dynamics, which is going to go by pretty quickly. But I encourage you, please make sure you get the book, because a lot of that answer comes out in there, and they can write stuff like that in the CRC exam. They'll say, choose the best answer. Don't say the right answer, they choose the best answer. And you have to go with everything that you know as a counselor or in your field of work to make those best judgments. And I believe sometimes those count as even more points than necessarily the ones that are just like quick definition. But what did you all think about that? I just want to hear from you quick before we push forward. What did you all think about that little survey / assessment? Gotti, can you hear me?
Hi, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, what did you think about that little assessment that we did?
I found it really insightful about the questions that I read and the answers that I was able to think of. So, I mean, I had to think, read twice, because I was like doing the elimination and I was constantly thinking what is right, what's wrong.
Definitely. So you had to, so you had to use some skills there, having to reread it and make sure I understood what the question was being asked. Thank you so much, Kiati. With that, Sunny, I'm gonna call you out right now, since first time I think I'm actually meeting you on here. What did you think about that assessment?
The quiz, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, I liked it. I think that the CRC is, it's like she said, it's a little bit of process elimination, and some of it is knowing it and reading between the lines. But you know, I would say that's probably a lot of it, because I didn't pass it the first time. But you know,
Okay. Good.
I would say it's pretty good.
Good, but and I'm glad, I'm glad you appreciate the self-disclosure on that, Sunny. You know, there's a couple other people in here I'm not recall that didn't pass it the first time, so don't feel bad. It's not an easy exam. I'm so surprised.
It's not, y'all. I'm telling you right now, it is not an easy exam. So, man, it's rough. So study.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and like Katty said, make sure you reread the question twice if you're not getting it to see what they're asking, because sometimes the answers can be within the question. Other times they're giving you the answer, just you got to figure out what that term is, or it's flipped around. But overall, it's not for you to ace at 100, but it's for you to make sure you understand that you're not trying to study to an answer, you're trying to study to the question, so you can get the right answer. So thank you so much, Sunday. Thank you so much, Katty. I appreciate your input on that.
Can I? All
Yeah,
right,
go for it.
my take is completely different. I got anxiety because I knew I didn't know some of the answers. And I start down that rabbit hole where, okay, if I don't know these answers, am I going to pass the test? Am I not going to pass the test? And I take the test at the back of the red book twice a week to see if I'm improving and learning anything. And yes, it gives me confidence, but it still makes me anxious. I know I'm not the only one who feels that way, but the best thing that I could do in order to help myself is keep reading do the questions in the back of the red book, because there are 200 of them. And it really helps you to understand what you need to learn. And with all academics is very literal when it comes to the questions. When they say the best answer, like you said, it's not the best answer, it is the answer. I found that out the hard way because I argued with a professor about, well, you might think it's the best answer, but I don't, so I learned the hard way that it is the answer. There is no such thing as the best answer. So you really have to know they are splitting hairs with some of these answers and questions.
And
So
I
just
will
wanted
agree with
to
that.
give you a bit
I
of
mean, some
insight.
of them are, you get a process of elimination, sometimes down to like 2 of them. And you're just like, oh, which one is it? But I will agree with that to some extent. I mean, sometimes some of them you can, eliminate all but 2, and then you're just like, God. But I did notice this, and I don't necessarily, obviously I haven't taken it under the new book, so I really can't answer this question. Maybe somebody else can. But I did not realize there was was it a first book? Or maybe it was a second book. Anyway, I think it was the first book. I didn't realize there was a first book. I had the second book because that's what everybody told me to get. That's what I studied. And come to find out, when I took it, somebody told me, well, did you ever get the green book? And I was like, what are they talking about, the green book? Anyway, so I went back and I bought the green book. I found it, an old copy of it online. And a lot of the questions off the test were some out of the green book. So I don't know if they have like a bank, and with every book that comes out, they just add questions from the first and second book. I don't know, but I noticed at that point, there were still questions out of the first green book. So when you made the comment that mainly it's out of this first book, or this third book, I'm thinking, well, so did they just make a whole new test? I mean, I guess that's my question is, or did they just add to the test bank?
My understanding is that they add to the test bank. So keep in mind, out of the 175 questions, 25 of them are going to be experimental, and depending on how the majority answer, like that, I think that like that example question that I did is likely what they would put on the next exam, probably for a right answer. So when you're taking a CRC exam, they can probably pull from the first, second, and third book, but more than likely they're going to keep the stuff that doesn't change, like some of the historical stuff that doesn't change, like the theories itself, maybe how you do the group work and family dynamics. But the newer content they're going to add now is going to be the VA information. It's going to be the workman's compensation. Now that they had a discussion about the whole change of forensics rehabilitation, forensics VR, I'm sure they're going to ask some questions on the newer exam for it. Now, whether those are going to count as big points or not, that depends on how they score it, because I don't know how they score it. But what I do know is that the reason why I suggest the red book is because it still has the stuff for 1 and 2, but in the third one, it keeps it with today's contemporary knowledge of what most people coming out of school or graduating today do. Because let's put it this way: if you're like myself as a student coming out of school the last couple of years, and the teacher's teaching this to the current volume, the current editions or current volumes, it would make sense that we would have a better chance of scoring it right than say somebody who's been out of school the last 5 or 6 years and hasn't really looked at that kind of academic education in a while because they've been working the field. That's why when I did the CRC exam, they gave me a survey saying which book helped the best. I suggested the red book because that's what my instructors gave me. And when I looked at the difference between either the green book or the blue book, a lot of the content was still in there in the red book, but with today's contemporary approaches to counseling.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I mean, like I said, just a quick reminder, if you see in the slides, there's other additional resources like the CRC prep cards. I guess I passed it. It won't let me see it anymore, but there's a link of resources. Some people update some of the Quizlet exams on here. I would encourage you to get the CRC mock exams press if you want to, and most definitely, use the prep cards or more metrics. But thank you so much, Sunny, for bringing that in. Thank you so much, Emily, for contributing on that. And right, it was anxiety driven because some of those questions were like, oh man, I really don't know. I have to think about it. And it was just kind of just to kind of give you an idea of how you can better study. And then more importantly, make sure that you're staying current with today's academics, what they're teaching in school, and today's knowledge. So don't be discouraged because there is no right or wrong. There is no percentage of scores or everything. This is just kind of just to give you an idea of some stuff. Again, this holds zero weight to anything of your merit or what you learn to do, but this kind of gives you a more or less of, if you haven't taken it yet, what to expect. And if you have taken it, I'm sure the way these questions may be framed, like, man, I remember going through this and it tripped me up because I was down to, like you said, 50-50. So thank you again. All right. Did anybody else want to mention anything before we continue? All
I
right.
just like the other way you formed the survey. For me, I was, when you said before we're gonna have a survey, I thought it was like something completely different. But I was kind of surprised to see it was a actual question. So I was able to kind of think back what we just learned or what we just discussed during the discussion and trying to apply that knowledge to the question. For me, I think was kind of good experience, and I had to like kind of think and read it a couple times to make sure that, okay, he mentioned something like this in a certain slide. I'm trying to remember and answer. So I think it was a kind of good exercise for me. So thank you, Kenneth.
Yeah, no problem. And I think Nahal said you got a lot of questions from the private section.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she said that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm not too sure what, but okay. All right, so let's move on over. We're almost done here. We got a few more. It looks like a lot of slides, but we're actually just about done. So we're actually
Kennedy,
not too.
what I mean is that I got a lot of questions from, we have the private versus public sections, right?
Uh-huh.
Rehab. And then speaking of red book or green book, unfortunately, I haven't been able to find a lot of information in either of those textbooks in terms of comparison between the two. We can see some of the comparison between those two sections in textbooks that we are teaching in our programs, but my understanding is for those who are really new with the field, you're not going to, those are the experiences that you achieve gradually by getting exposed to practices. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I just wanted to share with this cohort, that it's not only, but this is only my experience and my students at the program, that it is important. The material that we are reading is really important, but seems like it's more like a really, really comprehensive exam. And this exam is testing your critical thinking based off my knowledge. That's why I think it's really important for us to get a lot of rest before the exam. And because if you're tired, if it doesn't really matter how much time you spend reading the materials, it's more about a critical thinking. I myself struggle with, I usually stuck with two options, like what you guys mentioned earlier. And I see a lot of students experiencing the same. And I don't know what does CRC mean by choose the best answer. Like what Sani says, I think it's the answer, but I just wanted to share those things with you.
No, I appreciate it. Like I said, I think most people in here, either they're getting ready to graduate and they've received the privatized education, or like I said, they've been working in the field for a while. Now, am I saying the book is the sole and only book that's gonna get them to pass the exam. No, it's a comprehensive overview of everything that's either discussed or currently being discussed. And a matter of fact, I did send out a link that I called the CRC study guide because there was more information that's on there that could be covered on a CRC exam that's not covered in the red book. So, and I suggested as a good study guide because that can help you to make sure that if you're not finding it in the slides here, you're not finding it anywhere else, you can do some research on it. Like Social Security Administration, this section, the book's only going to teach you only so much, but the best way to do it is go to the Social Security website, see how the eligibility process is and what other services for those with disabilities, and dive more into it. And then when you're going to those questions, like you said, you do have to think critically and you have to read those things twice to make sure you get the best or the right answer. But no, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the your input, especially coming from the instructor side. Thank you so much. So thank you, Nahal. All right. Again, I appreciate everybody for chiming in on that. It's just perspectives to think about and other things that you can also help you to study for. It is, like I said, you're not going to be the expert in knowing each and every single answer. You want to have enough information on both the counseling and the rehabilitation side to pass, just enough, like a cutoff score. Okay, so let's go ahead and breeze through the family therapies, and then we are done. Not that many slides. So, of course, in family dynamics, disability doesn't only affect the person with disability, but the entire family system. If you deal with transitional youth, and anytime, every Thursday, and the more you chime in and contribute and sharing the knowledge and current, the better. It really helps. It really does. And so with that, going back to the whole thing about disabilities, it's one thing when somebody has, let's say, a family member who's a substance disorder, a substance user, and they're dealing with issues. It's another thing when a family finds out that their child's going to be born with Down syndrome and they feel like their lives are going to change forever. And it's hard sometimes because those family members may or may not, majority of the time, may not even be prepared to handle it. And so, like, think of it like this. I've heard from people say that, the doctor told me my child was going to be born with Down syndrome and they gave me the option to abort the child. Not even get a chance to birth, and then they give me the decision up to the parent. That's a hard, tough decision to make. And that could be traumatic. Whether they go through it or not, that's still a traumatic experience. There's therapy a part of it. Or the other part where it's, I'm going to be able to raise my kid and I'm thinking everything's fine. And I'm realizing my child's not developing at the same rate as my other children. She keeps doing these repetitive motions. And she didn't know that the child has a sort of autism until later on when it gets worse. That affects the family and affects the lifestyle and affects how the family itself takes care of them. So when we talk about this in terms of disability, we're talking about it in terms of how is the family reacting towards the person with the disability. With that, of course, it's two or more people related by birth, marriage, or adoption. I don't need to go further into that. With that too, there's 3 shifts that occurs in dimensions, which is the individual versus system dynamics. Families can view themselves as a whole rather than a collection of individuals. I think of this as, for me, the people that live in the Eastern thought. So those who come from an Asian country, those who come from a collectivist viewpoint where it's, it's not just about me, what I can do, it's my family, rather than individualism. And here in America, you have a Western European white person most of the time, unless their family has been cohesive, they're going to end up being on their own, Oh, you don't see my slides? I'm sorry. Over here talking and it's like, oh, you guys don't see my slides. Thank you for saying something. Thank you for keeping me accountable for the slides, but there are. And with that, of course, you guys have access to the same slides. I shared the link drives before. So if you need me to send it to you again, let me know. With that too, there's the linear versus circular causality. This refers to the idea that everyone's behavior affects everyone else's. And it does happen, it's one thing when you're dealing with clients and their family issues, and then you come home and you have your own family issues to deal with. And if you're frustrated that day, let's say the wife's frustrated that day, the husband senses it, the children sense it, and it just makes a negative feeling. Everybody experiences it around one another. Or if they're perpetuating their thoughts on one another. And then there's content versus the process dynamics, which means the issue is being discussed, the process, how the issue is seen by the family members and its interactions. So with that, the idea of the family system therapy is just how to approach family therapy in terms of helping people with disabilities. Problems might be a symptom of how the family functions. Behavior may serve as a function for the family. Of course, to be a function of family's inability to operate productively and a symptom of a dysfunctional patterns handed down generation from generation to generation. Say, for instance, those who have family members that have chronic illnesses, they have Social Security. When they have children dependents, the children may not necessarily be sick, and the parent wants to put the child on Social Security and make them seem like they are sick, and they are sick, so they keep collecting that check. That's another thing. That's another aspect that you can think about as well. That happens. So with that, there's another one too. This is going into the intergenerationals. It was introduced by Bowen in 1978. He said that an individual's behavior depends on their relations with an integrational network of family members. And he's using intergenerational, multi-generational, and transgenerational approach. I would encourage you to either read the book or look up about that so you can understand more in details what those approaches are. But ultimately, he believes that they provide a good understanding to develop a mature personality. Emotional fusion in the family must be addressed. So an intergenerational family process in the therapy is looking at the differentiation of self and the triangulation. You have social groups that influence the way people think, feel, and act. And then you have the 3-person system when it's formed when 2-person systems unstable and forms into a 3rd-person system under stress. The 3rd person becomes a messenger between the two, i.e. the middleman. And I'm sure if you've ever been raised in a family of 3, or maybe have a group of 3 or odd number, there's always going to be a middle person that gets the brunt. Bowen believed that these patterns persist in families across generations, and problematic behaviors can be passed down to create similar conflicts. So what a child learns as they're growing up is what they take with them to work their next family. You know, when they decide to have their own family and their own kids, are they doing the same thing that their parents did to them? Intergenerational, this is talking about different eras of family. So you have the nuclear family emotional process, family projections, multi-generationals, emotional cutoffs, sibling positions, and societal emotional process. So those are other parts that are looked at when you're dealing with the family. Nuclear family is the traditional. How does the family reject to one themselves? Let's say, for instance, your client's an alcoholic, but he didn't necessarily just become that way. He learned it from his father, who was also an alcoholic and was abusive. And the guy got older and did the same thing that his father did. Emotional cutoff, meaning that there was a break of negligence within the family. Sibling position, you get the youngest one who gets spoiled, the older one that's responsible, and the middle one that takes the brunt, and then societal emotional process. With that, it focuses on helping each family member deal with unresolved emotional patterns. And then, of course, the goal in family dynamics is to obtain a balanced sense of self and the family as a whole, and to make them understand that a family can work together if they're willing to everybody's willing to put their part to it. Now, going back to between psychoanalytic, cognitive, and so forth, and humanistic, and psychoanalytic, which was done by Nathan Ackerman, he focuses there on the importance of identifying basic wants and needs to keep individuals from interacting in a mature way. For example, I have issues with myself instead of issues between 2 people. The goal of that type of approach is to free family members from the unconscious restrictions to encourage an interaction with one another as a whole. So, and some of those techniques include by group leaders is listening, showing empathy to client and member, interpretation of what's being said, and analytic neutrality. So keyword here is in family therapy. Nathan Ackerman was the one who was the founder of the psychoanalytic family therapy. Is to help people identify their basic wants and needs it helps them to identify their basic wants and needs that keep individuals from interacting in a mature way. So like that, they can work well with one another. And humanistic, that goes back to the other question. You have Carl Whitaker and Virginia Satir. That's emphasizing on the mutual shared experience of the therapist and their family. And this here is to increase the family's capacity to experience their lives more fully by sharing their struggles in the present moment. So this is what's happening right now that's causing a dysfunction within the family. And so basically, this is, I would say, more of like, and this, the way Roger wrote this was create turmoil, confusion, chaos, and then coach the family members through the experience. So like, what's the situation? What did you cause the family members to be mad at each other, throw things at one another, and then how can we stop and think about that, like to fix one another? Eventually develop a warm, nurturing experience to allow family members to experience a deeper layer of emotions and genuinely connect with each other. And of course, can be two therapists in a session. So keep in mind, these are approaches, but in terms of disability, depending on how the family interacts with an individual who has a disability, it's going to determine the type of therapeutic approach you're going to want to take. That's basically the key part here, just so you're aware of it. In structural therapy, Salvador mentioned how family members interact with each other and understanding the structure of the family. This is a setting the set of rules to organize the way members relate to each other, family role dynamics, subsystems, and the therapist's roles create clear boundaries, increase flexibilities, and assist to modify dysfunctional family structures. So the way I would see that is like as a child becomes a teenager and an adult still living with parents, especially my generation and younger, they're still living with their family members. You still have to learn how to set boundaries. And sometimes that's not hard when the parents think, well, I raised you since you were a baby. I ain't got no boundaries. I don't need to set boundaries with you, and vice versa. Then you also have the strategic family therapy, which is from Jay Haley, that's focusing on problem solving in the present and to resolve a problem and arrive at change by focusing on behavior sequences rather than insight. All the members are responsible for this process and changing the outcome. And basically you as the therapist or the counselor acts as a consultant and is responsible and thinks of a strategy to help resolve those problems, advice, suggestions, and coaching. Now there's also the other one done by Michael White and David Epstein. This is called the narrative and constructivist. People are seen of actively shaping on how they understand the world, what meanings they create to explain in the world, and how these meanings are constructed. The focus is more on understanding the meaning that each family member attributes to the events or problems. The therapist is not an expert, but a collaborator. There's a difference. They may use questions about family relationships that allow family members to share their views on issues and their unique experiences with each other. And it gives each family member an opportunity to feel empowered to give a choice. So another thing you want to keep in mind too, depending on the culture of the family is going to depend on the type of therapeutic approach you will want to take if you are a family counselor. I believe somebody here is a family counselor, so if I'm wrong, feel free to interrupt me and say, no, Kennedy, this is what it actually means. Please do it. I don't mind. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Each type of approach doesn't mean you have to take one type of approach to a family. You got to understand who the family is and what the family's about to get an idea of what kind of approach may work best with them. Here we go. Solutions focused family. Done by Steve Desire and Ensu Kimberg. It's very popular and basically encourages the clients to shift from talking about problems to talking about solutions. So instead of somebody complaining all the time about issues, well, what are you going to do to fix it? What are you going to do to resolve it? Instead of just quote unquote biatching about it, pardon my language, what are you going to do to resolve the issue? So instead of just bringing it about, come with an answer to the problem, or not ask for an answer. That's using exception questions, that miracle questions, scaling questions, coping questions, formula first questions, and giving compliments. So things like that. Now, there's also the other one, which is the Milan Systemic Family Therapy. And this was done by a group of people. And what that does, it focuses on changing the meaning and beliefs rather than the behavior itself. So hypothesizing the answer why. Hold on. Sorry about that. My dog needed to use the bathroom. Sorry about that. And then you also have, of course, circulatory, when the problem is most difficult and when did the problem began, and then of course, neutrality. So there's just different system approaches that you will be taking. And then of course, you have the therapeutic alliance, how the therapist establishes an alliance with multiple family members who are experiencing conflicts. And this will be like a CRC based question. This will be like developing rapport with the family members, acknowledging members' experiences, encourage all family members to participate in counseling, and identify mutually agreed upon goals and processes, or goals among family members. Of course, I'm not going to go too much into this here. You saw that question. I think majority of people know that, but just keep in mind in the terms of CRC, what are situations that are going to be either talking about these and how you can identify what they are. And because they'll use those examples like that. Last but not least, there's also what's called the family adjustment disability, which I would encourage you to look up and read, because there's something called the double ABCX model, resiliency model, family stress, and the risk and resistance model. So with that being mentioned, we're done. So I know this took a little bit longer than expected, but I'm going to stop recording here.